Unanimous consent to address the Senate as if in morning business, and I ask unanimous consent that I be joined in the colloquy with the Senator from South Carolina, Senator Graham.
Without objection, so ordered.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to quote from this morning's editorial in the Wall Street Journal entitled Rand Paul's Drone Rant. And I'd like to read, for the edification of my colleagues, the editorial that was in the Wall Street Journal this morning, a credible media outlet. The Wall Street Journal reads, quote, "Give Rand Paul credit for theatrical timing. As a snowstorm descended on Washington, the Kentucky Republicans' old-fashioned filibuster Wednesday filled the attention void on Twitter and cable TV. If only his reasoning matched the showmanship. Shortly before noon, Senator Paul began a talking filibuster against John Brennan's nomination to lead the CIA. The tactic is rarely used in the Senate and was last seen in 2010. But Senator Paul said a, quote, alarm, unquote, had to be sounded about the threat to Americans from their own government. He promised to speak, quote, until the president says no, he will not kill you at a cafe. He meant by a military drone. He's apparently serious, though his argument isn't. Senator Paul had written the White House to inquire about the possibility of a drone strike against a U.S. citizen on American soil. Attorney General Eric Holder replied that the U.S. hasn't, and, quote, has no intention to bomb any specific territory. Drones are limited to the remotest area of conflict zones like Pakistan and Yemen. But as a hypothetical constitutional matter, Mr. Holder acknowledged the President can authorize the use of lethal military force within U.S. territory. This shocked Senator Paul, who invoked the Constitution and Miranda rights. Under current U.S. policy, Mr. Paul mused on the floor, Jane Fonda could have been legally killed by a Hellfire missile during her tour of communist Hanoi in 1972. A group of non-combatants sitting in public view in Houston may soon be pulverized, he declared. Calm down, Senator. Mr. Holder is right, even if he doesn't explain the law very well. The U.S. government cannot randomly target American citizens on U.S. soil or anywhere else. I repeat that. The U.S. government cannot randomly target American citizens on U.S. soil or anywhere else. What it can do under the laws of war is target an enemy combatant anywhere at any time, including on U.S. soil. This includes a U.S. Senate citizen who is also an enemy combatant. The President can designate such a combatant if he belongs to an entity, a government, say, or a terrorist network like Al-Qaeda that has taken up arms against the United States as part of an internationally recognized armed conflict. That does not include Hanoi Jane. Such a conflict exists between the U.S. and Al-Qaeda. So Mr. Holder is right that the U.S. could have targeted, say, U.S. citizen Anwar al-Awlaki had he continued to live in Virginia. The U.S. killed him in Yemen before he could kill more Americans. But under the law, al-Awlaki was no different than the Nazis who came ashore on Long Island in World War II and were captured and executed. The country needs more senators who care about liberty. But if Mr. Paul wants to be taken seriously, he needs to do more than pull political stunts that fire up impressionable libertarian kids in their college dorms. He needs to know what he's talking about. Well, Mr. President, I watched some of that quote, debate, unquote, yesterday. I saw colleagues of mine who know better come to the floor and voice this same concern, which is totally unfounded. I must say that the use of Jane Fonda's name does evoke certain memories with me, and I must say that she is not my favorite American, but I also believe that, as odious as it was, Ms. Fonda acted within her constitutional rights. And to somehow say that someone who disagrees with American policy and even may demonstrate against it is somehow a member of an organization which makes that individual an enemy combatant is simply false. It is simply false. Now, Mr. President, I believe that we need to visit this whole issue of the use of drones, who uses them, whether the CIA should become their own Air Force, what the oversight is, what the legal and political foundations for this kind of conflict needs to be reviewed. And the foundation rests mostly on laws designed for another task that government lawyers have interpreted without public scrutiny to meet new challenges. Outside the surveillance context, Congress as a body has not debated or approved the means or ends of secret warfare, because secret surveillance and targeted strikes, rather than U.S. military detention, are central to the new warfare. There are no viable plaintiffs to test the government's authorities in court. In short, executive branch decisions since 2001 have led the nation to a new type of war against new enemies on a new battlefield without enough focused national debate, deliberate congressional approval, or real judiciary review. And we probably need a new framework statute akin to the National Security Act of 1947, or the series of intelligent reforms made after Watergate, or even the 2001 authorization of force to define the scope of the new war, the authorities and limitations on presidential power, and forms of review of the president's actions. I'm quoting from an article by Jack Goldsmith. It was in the Washington Post on February 5th, 2013. U.S. needs a rule book for secret warfare. But I don't think we should have any doubt that there are people, both within the United States of America and outside of it, who are members of terrorist organizations that want to repeat 9/11. All of us, thank God, there's not been a repeat of 9/11. Most of the experts I know will say that there's been a certain element of luck, but a small element, but still an element of luck, such as the underwear bomber and others that have prevented a devastating attack on the United States. But to somehow allege or infer that the President of the United States is going to kill somebody like Jane Fonda or someone who disagrees with the policies is a stretch of imagination which is frankly ridiculous. Ridiculous. So I don't disagree that we need more debate, more discussion, and frankly probably more legislation to make sure that America does protect the rights of all of our citizens, to make sure at the same time that if someone is an enemy combatant, that enemy combatant has nowhere to hide. Not in a cafe, not anywhere. But to say that somehow that even though we would try to take that person, to say that we would hit them in a cafe with a Hellfire missile, first of all, there are no drones with Hellfire missiles anywhere near. They're over in places like Yemen and Afghanistan and other places in the world. So we've done I think, a disservice to a lot of Americans by making them believe that somehow they're in danger from their government. They're not. But we are in danger. We are in danger from a dedicated, long-standing, easily replaceable leadership enemy that is hell-bent on our destruction. And this leads us to having to do things that perhaps we haven't had to do in other more conventional wars. And I don't believe that Anwar al-Awlaki should have been protected anywhere in the world. But that doesn't mean that they're going to take him out with a Hellfire missile. It means that we're going to use our best intelligence to apprehend and to debrief these people so that we can gain the necessary intelligence to bring them all to justice. So, Mr. President, all I can say is that I don't think that what happened yesterday is helpful to the American people. We need a discussion, as I said, about exactly how we are going to address this new form of almost interminable warfare, which is very different from anything we've ever faced in the past. But somehow, to allege that the United States of America, our government, would drop a drone Hellfire missile on Jane Fonda, that brings the conversation from a serious discussion about U.S. policy to the realm of the ridiculous. I'd also like to add an additional note, Mr. President. About 42%, as I'm told, of the members of this Senate are here for 6 years or less. Every time a majority party is in power, they become frustrated with the exercise of the minority of their rights here in the Senate. And back some years ago, we were going to eliminate, when Republicans, this side of the aisle was in the majority, we were going to eliminate the ability to call for 60 votes for judges. Confirmation of judges. We were able to put that aside. There was another effort just at the beginning of this Senate to do away with 60 votes and back down to 51, which in my view would have destroyed the Senate. A group of us worked very hard for a long time to come up with some compromises that would allow the Senate to move more rapidly, but at the same time, and efficiently, but at the same time, preserve the 60-vote majority requirement on some pieces of legislation. What we saw yesterday is going to give ammunition to those critics who say that the rules of the Senate are being abused. I hope that my colleagues on this side of the aisle will take that in consideration.